when you start to do what I call that emotional motivator and say, okay, if you don't do anything, this is the consequence, then all of a sudden, now you're starting to motivate them to get to the point where they're going to take action. Hello and welcome to Land and Deliver. I'm Darren Wingham and we are the Marketing and Communications podcast. It's all about making messages land and delivered in ways that people will care and then act on.
I'm Louise, Chandler-Rutt, and if you're responsible for a message and what happens after it's delivered, this podcast is especially for you.
Now, today, in this episode, we're talking about storytelling in marketing, but really, we're talking about one particular habit that we can sometimes slide into. It's a bad habit, and we're all guilty of this, and this habit is jumping straight to the solution in a creative meeting.
I think it has happened to all of us. I mean, ultimately, we can be very excited about a concept or a campaign or an idea, and it's a really something that happens on a primal level. It feels great because we all visualize the solution and we want to get to it really quickly. But today we're going to say, hold on and pause. Imagine yourself as a piano player if you're at the Royal Albert Hall. You're performing to a large audience. Everyone's applauding and it's great. But hang on, have you done the prep? And this is what we're talking to you about today. In meetings, for example, it can feel like progress when you have a solution. But in reality, it rarely connects with the audience. So it's failed in its impact from the very moment that you started. But today, don't worry, Darren and I are going to help you fix that problem.
Yes, we've learned the hard way too, haven't we, really?
Oh, yes, over many years. Hang on a minute, how many combined years of experience have we got? I'm on 23 years.
I'm not going to say any more. I sometimes say to people when God was a boy, and that so far that's the only laugh I've ever had on that particular joke, quote unquote.
But given we've worked in the media, marketing, and communications industry for a long time with seniors and with all layers of seniority, we know we can spot it. So that's why we're here today to help you out.
So by the end of this episode, you'll be able to spot when your team are jumping in too quickly, like we've all been able to do, and actually understand why and see it almost like as a bit of an alarm signal. And we've got a simple, memorable framework for building this story-led marketing messages that starts where the audience actually is and creates that right pressure before introducing a solution that can then naturally lead to your audience taking action. And you'll leave with a real practical way just to kind of slow down that thinking, because we go a million miles down, we get creative. Just enough so your message doesn't just sound good, but actually lands and then delivers in that way that people can act on.
Well, it's really great to have your company here today, and we'd be delighted if you subscribe and actually share this podcast episode or others that are in the series as well. And you can also give us your feedback to comment and tell us what you think.
Good. landanddeliver.co.uk is the website address. Yeah. So let's just kind of go to the meetings we've all had, Louise.
Yes, you get that calendar invite that drops into your calendar. So off you go with your notepad and pen ready.
And there's coffee, and there's Haribo sweets. Yes. What I call the crack cocaine of sweets.
The sugariness. And you've been called together to create a particular, to try and solve a particular problem. But often we get a bit carried away and people turn up with solutions already, from your experience as well, Darren.
I mean, because you're in the room, everyone wants to please. Someone said, look, we need to do this either, it could be marketing campaign, we've got to write some really good marketing copy, or maybe we're looking for a video or a podcast or anything like that. And you have this room, and everyone's really excited because everyone wants to contribute, right? You want to be the person that has the idea, don't you? That is the winning idea, and really, we feel like we're rewarded for having answers.
It's true. The silence can feel uncomfortable. No one wants that awkward silence where no one's come with any ideas and there's tumbleweed going through the room. And I'll also say as well, in these scenarios, we're time poor. there may not be a lot of time in our calendars that we can find to have these meetings. And also it may be a case of something needs to launch really soon. So there's a real pressure in the room to deliver something that's going to be succinct, creative, hit the nail on the head, but also to make sure that there's none of those awkward silences. That's what we're dealing with, really.
And it's competition in the room, I think, as well. To go, right, I've got this idea, and they go, brilliant, that's wonderful. You are the man or woman with the moment. You had this brilliant idea. Let's go with you. Let's pray to the altar of you. Yeah. And so that's that real strong driver to go from initial briefing, however short it may be, straight to the idea.
I think so. I think also from my experience, I know there's been times when the meeting's been called, but I've probably got a bit of an inclination, a bit of an idea of what's coming up, what's going on. And I'll want to know, well, what are the problems? And sometimes there's a long list of things that we need to solve. And for me, I'm all about trying to manage expectations. There's things going on that often people come to marketing with and expect us to wave a magic wand and to say, ta-da, we've solved it all forever. Not the case. So sometimes it's actually asking some really honest questions and making sure that you're briefed to get a full idea of the problems. And it's not to sound negative and to sound like an Eeyore, no, but it's to be realistic about what you're up against so you know what you're solving.
It is, because actually what you're doing is you're kind of agreeing what the solution is, and you haven't really investigated what the question is.
Yeah.
It's a bit like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You know the answer, but what's the question? Because actually you could be going down a completely wrong path at that moment.
Yeah, because there's just an eagerness to solve it, an eagerness to say, right, I've got the answer, ta-da, all hail you. But today we're going to walk you through some ideas to help you pause, and not for too long.
No,
because as I say, I know we're time poor, but to help you actually turn something. Turn a problem into a practical way of solving it.
Because the impact of, where you're in a meeting where you're trying to save time, going down that wrong route, and I talk from, experience, working with a big corporation in London, they went to the idea first and then got it all produced, and then all of a sudden you go, hang on a minute. We've forgotten about the person we're speaking to. And they can't connect with it, and it's you then wasting more time, quote unquote, fixing it in the edit.
It's true. I think I know for you, Darren, we both agree that we need to take that step back, and don't be afraid to be that voice in the room that says, hang on, let's pause. Because I know sometimes people get carried away with a creative idea and a campaign, and they think, right, let's just run with it. And everyone's kind of getting swept up in this wave of fun and doing. But I've been that voice in the room before, where you kind of put your hand up, or if it's a virtual meeting, you put your hand up and you're like, oh, Louise, let's come to you. And you go, okay, guys, can we just think about this? And that stepping back and pausing, people's faces kind of sink.
But I think there's a cost, isn't there, for jumping to the solution too early, isn't it? So although you sound like I'm the same. You kind of gone, hang on a minute, let's slow down. They kind of look at you and just go, you are the fun sponge. Because there is a cost to jumping in too early, isn't there?
There is. The risks are quite high in terms of. For me, I feel that if something is going to be executed really well, that's because it's planned and been thought through. If we rush in too quickly, the risk is that you're not thinking of certain details that actually can make things unravel in the future. So it's better to pause and step back and be that voice of reason in the meeting, rather than to let it all gallop away out of control. And the next thing you know, there's no call to actions, there's no planning, there's no clarity. And then you're then trying to backtrack and fix things. And it's kind of a bit too late then.
And also to the person that you're trying to connect with, whether it's a member of the audience or whatever you're doing with your marketing, to them, because that's the person you're speaking to. You're in the room getting all excited with your friends, and actually the most important person in the room is the audience, and obviously they can't be there because otherwise you wouldn't have the marketing message.
Yeah.
But to them it can feel really abstract because you've gone down this exciting route and they don't know that backstory, and they're kind of going, hey, what?
You've lost us. You've lost us. Yeah, that's the thing. We really don't want to risk that. So, that's why today I believe we have 6 steps that we're going to take people through.
We do. I think it's a case of just really doing that step back, isn't it? And just, in the best will in the world, it's always starting with the end in mind. So you, rather than start in the middle with the idea, you step right back and think about what do you want to achieve, and then who you want to talk to.
It's true. Can I ask as well, Darren, from your experience, when, like myself, when you've been in that room and on that meeting and that voice of reason to pause people, what have you said to make people come to their senses? Is there a particular question that you've asked them maybe?
That's a really good point, actually, because I think the one thing we haven't talked about is the bias in the room. Because there is a bias. And I've had quite, as the person who's you're trying to steer the creative who understands the production process of making this thing. Mm-hmm. And when someone says, we're going to fix it in the edit, or with yourself with the copy or whatever, you just gotta go, no, please not. But there's a bias. I had a conversation just the other day when someone said, I want to do this, and this, and I go, that's brilliant, and that connects with your company. But in the world of recycling, for example, best will in the world, no one cares. So when you're talking about something like World Earth Day, for example, the bias is we're a company that really believes in our business is about recycling. That's wonderful, but the thing that's going to make someone move is not necessarily World Earth Day. It's about making a small change. Perhaps with the new bins in where we live now, you've got to put the food in a separate bin. And then
my husband loves that. But you're right. It's true.
That's a whole other conversation for another time, I think, Luke. Because honestly, in our household, there's been like, why should I put this bin? But the consequence is actually you've got to do that because they're going to fine you soon. So then they're doing it for very good. Council doing it for good reasons. But that's the bias you got to attack. I think quite calmly and always. I believe when I have that bias thrown at me by people saying, but we've got the idea, I say, let's just think about what we want to achieve, who the people are, and just always taking them back in their mind to say, this is the person we're talking to, and we'll come to about personas later on, but visualizing that and going, this is what we want them to do. And then we're talking about the journey, not the sexy idea. I
think what you're talking about is, start at the end and work your way back, which is a really good way of thinking of it. I go back to my days when I was a journalist and when I wanted to pitch ideas for stories to my editor. And I would go into, this is radio journalism, and I would go into him and into his office and say, right, I have this idea. And he would respond with a very simple phrase that I still know to this day, make me care.
Yes.
Make me care. It was as simple as that. He would say to me, make me care, because I'd be giving him stats and data and all of this. And sometimes I think when I've had these kind of meetings where people kind of gallop away with this idea, I say to them, make me care. And when I say me, it's not an ego thing. I'm thinking of the audience who are going to receive the message. Make the audience care. Because often when we talk about marketing, sometimes it's a behavioural change campaign where we're trying to inspire a change. I've worked on campaigns where it's been about stopping smoking, like you said, recycling. So you've got to make the person care in order for them to act. So sometimes when we're in these meetings and everyone's getting really excited with an idea, the voice of reason, the hand that goes up, make me care.
Yeah. And I think actually that's a really good point when someone is saying, I believe it should be like this, is then to go, well, why should I care? And that's a really if you, dear listener, have the problem and you're trying to convince someone, I think that's a really good way to make someone stop and go, well,
absolutely.
That's a really good challenging question.
We're now, I think, if you look at the human psyche, rightly or wrongly, people say, what's in it for me? Make me care. What's in it for me? Why should I? We are, though. It's a bit naughty, if I'm honest, shouldn't be. But we are in that kind of mindset of, I'm busy, I'm up against it, make me care, what's in it for me? And I think if we can think more like that in our campaign planning, that may help us to make sure that we don't get too excited. But let's get into these 6 steps.
Yes, absolutely. So what this is the 6 Ps. And really it's the process to create a story arc that, if you go through this process, it means you cover all the bases and you don't go to that middle bit early. So it's the 6 Ps. We'll kind of go through each step with you, but essentially it's person, problem, pressure, promise, proof, and push.
I think you should write those on a Post-it note. If you're listening or watching this, you're like, what P's? Get a Post-it note, then you can write down these 6 P's, stick it by your laptop, and you're good to go.
But don't worry if you miss it all. We've got the show notes, so we'll show you how you can download those, and then that gives you a bit more detail on it. So and it's a proper sequence as well, and it's always good to spend the right time in the right places. So if we just talk about person, for example, you had a really good thought on, when we're talking about making a video, and let's say we're trying to sell a service, rather than going, this service is great, it's actually thinking about who it's for.
Indeed. The first P, as you said, Darren, is person. And really that's thinking about who is your ideal audience, your ideal customer, the ideal person who will engage with this message, because you're talking to them, be it the working mum, be it the construction worker, or if it's a student, or, someone who works in banking in the finance district in London. Who is that person that you're talking to? Because that really helps you to work out, okay, I'm going to use language or phrasing or examples that resonate with them. I often think when you walk down a high street, for example, and you see coffee shops, high streets are full of coffee shops. You think, do we really need all these? But each coffee shop is talking to a very distinct audience. I had an incident recently where I went in 2 consecutive mornings. One morning I went to Greg's, and the next morning at a very similar time, I went to Costa. Now, to the blind naked eye, you think, well, they're 2 coffee shops. They're the same. They're not. They actually target very different audiences. How do you know that? Through their branding, through actually the layout of the coffee shop and how it's positioned, but also through the offers that they offer. When you look at Greg's, they do a deal, for example, like 3 till 5 for the students coming out after school. Costa don't do that. Costa tended, from my experience, to have more mother and baby groups. Greg's, at the same time that I went in the next day, had more of the people on the way to work, your tradespeople. So when I talk about understanding your person, we want to help you build a persona, an avatar, someone who will help you. You can look at that picture and say, right, actually, I am talking to Claire, who is, 35 to 45. She is a chef, or she works in the catering industry. And actually, if we're doing a campaign around food waste, we need to get people like the hospitality and catering industry on board to understand why they need to improve their food and package recycling. Right, Claire? We know your pain points, your problems. We know who we're talking to. We're going to target it at you. That's why it's so vital, and it's the first P.
You're right. And I think also it's one thing knowing who you're talking to, but this is where the research really comes in. It's also checking to make sure they're the right person, because you could be setting up a service. You think, this is the person I'm talking to, because quote unquote, but actually if you do the research into them and make sure that they're a profitable cohort and really understand that there's enough of them in the market to do that, assuming you're launching a new product. But if you're in a corporate environment and you've done all that research, then great. But it's a really good piece to do if you're launching something, is just to make sure that A, that's your person, but B, also go that extra step to make sure there's enough of them that when you launch the product can make that profitable.
You're right. This is the thing. We can make assumptions, which can be a bit dangerous. And often when I work with clients on campaigns and talk to people in the planning stages, and they say, well, how do I know? How do I find this audience? How do I know they're the right ones for me? And do you know the surprising thing? We often have the clues. We just don't realise. Yeah. So I'll say to clients, have you done feedback recently? Have you done these surveys? And recently could even be in the last 3 to 4 months. We all have something. We may have testimonials. We have some clues that help that process to start to understand your ideal audience. I did it recently. I looked at 30 businesses that I've spoken to in the last 6 to 8 months, collated all that feedback, and it helped me understand the pains, the trends, the patterns of what people are looking for. We do often have the clues already, so it's not always a starting from scratch, but if it is, ask people.
Yeah.
We don't have to make assumptions that, the first P in this 6-stage framework is person, and if you don't know, ask.
I think it's also one of those things that I've been speaking to somebody who's a business mentor, And what he tends to do, he tends to go into public spaces and says, or in a coffee shop, if he thinks that this person's there, and can I buy you a coffee shop, and buy you a cup of coffee, and ask you some questions.
Yeah, you learn
I think
a lot.
it's quite brave, really, but yeah.
Yeah, you do. So yeah, understanding your person is the first P. Up next, problem.
Yeah,
Hang on, we need a dramatic.
The problem is where, you really start to slow down and just think about this for a minute from your person's point of view. You've got the visualization of the person in your head, and what is it they're dealing with. So, but also seeing it from their perspective, because we all come from different cultures, different backgrounds, and it's always just by having that conversation with them and understanding who they are, then you understand their perspective, and that's really, really important. That's a bit of human the emotional intelligence
you're absolutely
piece really
right.
going on there. I did a bit of work for a big company, and they oversee a sector of business in the UK, and they're based in the walkie-talkie building, and they went and said, we want to make a video about AI. What we want you to do is we want you to come out the lift. It's in the walkie-talkie building, come through, you can see us all doing AI and how wonderful it is. And at no point did they say about the person they're talking to and what their fear is. Is their fear about AI going to be addressed by some really cool shots floating through a really swanky building?
No.
So by understanding the problem, then that really helps to start to motivate you and to inspire you, start to think about those sparks of an idea that's going to take down the right route.
I think so. And I think going back to the first P of person, if you understand who you're talking to, you can then talk in their language. You can then address the issue. I always remember a scenario I was given. If you are a salesman who sells beds, people think, well, you're just selling a bed. No, you're selling a good night's sleep. And if you can't get a good night's sleep, what is that worth to you? How does that affect your day? How does that affect your well-being? So actually, when you think of a problem that someone's having, if they walk into a bed shop, yes, they're just buying a new bed, and aesthetically they want it to look pretty. They may even want the one where the TV pops up at the end and all that. Lovely. But what you're actually selling them is comfort, well-being, and a good night's sleep. And if you can understand that problem that the person's having, you can probably sell them the best bed ever, because they will then understand how you are solving their problem. And if you take that scenario and think about it in a business marketing sense, sometimes the problem that we're trying to solve, it may be quite superficial. But if you really kind of dig down a few layers and work out, actually, we are selling them time or saving them money, or maybe we're selling, freedom. At the moment, I've noticed there's loads of perfume adverts on TV, and I watch some of these perfume fragrance adverts. I think, what is this? Oh, and a perfume bottle comes up at the end. But you don't see the perfume sometimes at the beginning, because what they're selling is a feeling, an experience, freedom, rolling around in meadows. Now, I love perfume, and when I put it on, I don't roll around in a meadow. But
well, that's a whole other podcast. Probably for a different audience, Lou, to be fair.
Yeah. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, the problem that they're trying to solve for the customer, for that ideal customer and that age group, is how you feel about yourself, how you present yourself to the world, and how you want to feel comfortable in your own skin. And really brainstorm what your problem is, because you'll start at a superficial level, but you may work out some other layers to it that I think surprise you.
You're right, actually. I mean, talking about perfume, I remember when the perfume adverts come on, bloke, I'm sorry. You then see the difference, because I look at it and I go, this is just what the hell's going on. My daughter's going, oh, I really want that perfume, and I'm going, there we go. Yeah. They've hit the cohort. Don't need to talk to me. I'm but then if I was in a meeting doing advertising about perfume, then that's where emotional intelligence comes in. You go, hang on a minute, my bias. Let me talk to anyone in the room that is like that, or let's refer to the marketing. Yeah, indeed. Because you don't want your bias to come in, and in my case, cheesy jokes in perfume ads don't work.
So we've talked about people, problem. Next one, pressure.
Yeah, I think so. Because once you understand who you're talking to and you have them in your mind, and then you have them almost encountering that problem, then what you've done at that point is grab their attention. for a moment, you've grabbed their attention and you explain it differently to me, but and I have to clean this up. Why should I give a fudge? Is then what my thing about what's that pressure? And then what we're saying about pressure is actually talking to your audience to say, okay, this is your problem, and the pressure is what happens if you don't do anything about it, because that's when you start to not necessarily really scare them, but when you start to do what I call that emotional motivator and say, okay, if you don't do anything, this is the consequence, then all of a sudden now you're starting to motivate them to get to the point where they're going to take action.
A real example of that is during the daytime in particular, you tend to see adverts for charities like RSPCA where they talk about animals being neglected, and they show us some really hard-hitting images of animals who have been neglected and mistreated. And that's the pressure. They're showing us the pressure that actually if you don't donate and set up a direct debit monthly or give a one-off donation, these animals are suffering. They show you kind of like the before and after, and the before is really hard to see. And in this kind of campaign video that they've created, they're showing us the problem. Even the voiceover explains, people are neglecting their animals, or due to cost of living pressures, more animals are falling into hardship and being being handed into these animal shelters, and the pressure is they're being neglected.
Yeah.
So even in this particular scenario, it's very clear. And they're saying, if you don't act, we can help, but we can't help as much. We need your donations. So when you watch these videos, even in that messaging, very clear language, they're really appealing to animal enthusiasts and animal lovers to help protect these animals. They've told us the problem, and they've then given us the pressure that if you don't act, what will happen? Yeah. And it pulls on your heartstrings. I don't have pets, but I look at it and I think, oh, that poor dog's malnourished. Or, it was found in a home that was really dirty, and clearly, the dog's looking really intimidated and scared and trembling. They've done that to give us the pressure.
Yes. And it's very, very powerful. And I would say, actually, you can flip it and do it the other way by applying the pressure by showing a wonderful, desirable outcome. You think about holidays, for example, people sitting there enjoying their carefree life while you're sitting there thinking about, I've got an email to answer, or, doing X, Y, and Z, or in the house, or cleaning the house, or doing DIY or whatever. If you're presented by the opposite, this idyllic week where you're just kicking back and having a great time, that's also a positive pressure.
Yeah.
By showing a desirable outcome and something to aspire to.
Yeah.
It can also be just as strong.
You're right. It's true. It's either an emotional element to pull on our heartstrings, or it's something that makes us say, oh, I want to move away from that's boring and mundane to that's sunny and fun. I'll have sunny and fun, please. Where do I go, British Airways? Thank you very much. I'll get booked on. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
One-way ticket.
Yeah. So that's the pressure.
Yeah, so we've got the pressure, and we're starting to then, at that point, they're going, okay, I can see that I'm on the verge now of doing something. So that's the difference, isn't it? We've got to that middle bit, but by going through these steps, you now know that their mindset is in the right place that you need them to be to take the action that you want them to take. And so therefore you can then start to pull them in by the promise.
And this is the thing with the promise. We really want to remind you that in this process that you're in this meeting, remember, you've been thrown in, you've got this calendar invite, everyone's trying to rush to the solution and to work it out ultra quick to get it done. And there's that excitement in the room. And these steps we're taking you through is really helping you to work through a framework to make sure your planning is key. And with the promise, we don't want to over promise and under deliver. We really want to make sure that the promise is something that can be delivered and executed really well. And I say that in the sense of fulfilling a wish. Now, I've worked on campaigns before where we're in this room having this meeting and people want to say that, there's going to be 100 more appointments that we can guarantee thanks to this healthcare campaign that we're running. But I have been that voice in the room that not only do I say make me care, but I say, how are we going to deliver those 100 appointments? Because when you promise something in a campaign and an advert, it's really about making sure that you thought about all the steps to get you to that fulfilled wish. And what you don't want to say is, yes, we're going to guarantee 100 more appointments, but no one's worked out how they can be booked, where they can be booked, And this is where it's really careful. You have to be careful with a promise, because we have seen previously where some companies will overpromise and underdeliver, and we laugh because I think I would suggest it's because they've sat in meetings and got really excited about an idea and not thought it through. Really, please, I would advise you that in your planning, when you're going to promise an action and an outcome, think about the kind of breadcrumb trail of how you're going to get there. And if it is difficult, you're better off flagging it in this meeting now rather than waiting until the horse has bolted and then you go, actually, oh no, we can't deliver this. And then you look silly. You're
right, because I think there are other ways of doing that. So your objective may be 100 appointments, but, that's a really, really narrow definition. And sometimes if you're in pharmacy or in finance, for example, you're also going to come up against regulatory objections and thoughts and pushbacks. So think about what that promise is. Is it perhaps 100 appointments, or is it, we are going to look to get to nearly, I don't know, say you had 100 appointments before, you're adding another 100 appointments in there. We're going to aim to almost double the number of appointments available, or we're going to dramatically reduce the time so you're not waiting as long, and talk about it in a human way, so that, because that's the end of the day, isn't it? The greatest, I remember someone was saying that the greatest thing about Ubers, for example, isn't necessarily the fact that it's cheaper or they come quicker. It's the fact that you can see how long they're going to take. So when in the old days, you used to phone up ABC taxis. We'll have a taxi with you there soon, sir. Soon means nothing.
Especially if you're standing in the rain.
Yeah.
That soon needs to be quick.
But soon could be 10 minutes, but you don't know that. And then by the time 10 minutes comes along, you're kind of like, okay, fair enough. But, if you had an Uber that's set there and you see the car and it's 15 minutes, it's longer, but you know what the promise is.
Yeah.
And you can see it and you can track it.
It's true.
So you know it's going to take longer, but you know when the solution's coming. So it's and on a human level, it's really satisfying.
It sets an expectation, I think, as well, certainly. So, yes, do be careful with the promises that you make. I mean, none of us have genies with lamps. Well, I certainly don't. But if we had a genie with a lamp who could deliver, that's fine, but we don't. And so we have to be careful that when we're interacting with members of the public, that we do just fulfill our promises and fulfill them in a way that is easy for us to measure in a marketing sense, but also allows us to not come a cropper and fall at the first hurdle.
Yeah. But there are plenty, and that's where you can sink in that bit. And there are plenty of ways you can do that. But and even go back to your person if you can do the research or thinking about them and go, okay, we can say this, or this. Which one's going to land with them better? And then by doing all that work, then you can kind of go back up the chain and just go, okay, that's and being creative with that.
It's true. Be creative with it, and also know how you're able to fulfill it.
Yeah.
So that whatever team you're talking to, be it compliance, regulatory, creative, that it's been considered and thought through.
Okay, so what about the proof?
Okay, this is where basically in a campaign message, you want to prove that you have credibility of what you've done. You've got an established history of actually understanding that you've done this work for a long time. What we have to remember is sometimes brands are interacting with their ideal audience and customer for the first time. So you're trying to build awareness, visibility, but also trying to prove to that ideal customer and audience you know your stuff and they can trust you. So proof is all about trying to create a message or a set of messages that will allow people to not only interact with you and get to the push, which we'll get to in a minute, but also allow people to say they buy into you and what you do. So they may want to give you a testimonial, a referral, a feedback. We have all these websites nowadays like Trustpilot that allow people to give these reviews and comments. So we're trying to inspire people to feel like, actually, I like you. I like what you're telling me to say and do. So I will want to give some kind of feedback and proof. And then that helps you to, as we were saying earlier, understand your ideal audience and customer, what they want from you, and the problems and pressures that you're fixing for them.
And then last one is push, which is basically, because we wanted to do it as all P's, it really is call to action. That's what we say.
It's true. It's call to action. Yeah. Push, call to action.
But we say push.
Yeah.
And that's just really, you know, by that time, hopefully you've done the work. They're ready to do the thing. So all you got to do is just to make that call to action a really stress-free, low impact barrier, so then they can do the thing you want them to do, and then you're away.
I think ultimately as well, what we're thinking of is giving the key audience and ideal person an easy, small call to action. And when I say easy, it can't be scrolling through, do this, click this. You've lost people by then. It has to be really straightforward. It has to be intuitive. And I think with call to actions, you need to be able to measure it to know as well what the outcome of all this activity that you've done. But you want to make sure that it's just one as well. I've seen campaigns where people give multiple. That's going to confuse people. What do I do first? You've lost me. I've gone. You know, let's just have one that is easy to measure. And that could be a phone call. It could be a direct message. It could be an email. It could be sign up to this inquiry form. Just something that allows you to say, thanks to this, we've been able to gather up this many inquiries, or this many website clicks, or these many people came to our landing page. Something that allows you to invite that action, that push, and then you know the outcome.
Yeah. So really it's just thinking about those 6 P's, but also making sure that you kind of dwell in that person, problem, pressure a little bit longer than you would normally do, even though everyone's really keen to get to the next bit, because as we've just demonstrated, we've gone back up the chain to check the bottom one, you know, to check that call to action and to check that pressure by visualizing our person is really important.
And then when you get to the promise and the push, this is really a case of saying, actually, we are comfortable and confident now that we can deliver this well. And I think when you are walking through this, if you imagine if this campaign is going to have quite a lot of impact for your business and your organisation and company, you may even need to brief senior leaders on this campaign. They may need to present this back to stakeholders and key influential people. So if you can show your due diligence with these P's, it's not just good for you in the meeting, it's great as well for when you are having to work with senior leaders within your business, because this is something that then they can then buy into and be a part of when they're presenting back to investors or having to give a speech or a presentation. And hopefully this framework is something you can use going forward as well.
I think that's a really good point, actually. I think, you know, when I've had conversations with, you know, CEOs in FTSE 100 companies, I've been, you know, fortunate enough to work in that environment for a bit, and I've sat someone down there to be interviewed, or we need to talk about something, and they've pushed back and gone, I'm not doing it like that. Then, you know, you then have the confidence, because you've gone through the 6 P's in your mind. I'm not a fast thinker, right, Louise? I really am not. I have to practice and understand what I have to, in my head, I have to have things like this. Because when someone in the moment who could be more articulate than me, who is, you know, a CEO who works at a high level, maybe talking to government, talking to politicians, and in that high stakes, you know, conversational role, you can then fall back and go, okay, I've done the prep already by knowing who the person is that we're speaking to. So then you can use that as the basis as your reply, but also you know what the outcomes are. So if you know those 2 ends really, really well, then that helps you when you've got some bias in front of you from someone who may be, you know, in a hierarchical environment, quite a few steps ahead of you. Could be older than you if you're you know, in marketing and you're in your mid-20s and you've got a CEO in his 50s telling you he knows everything. Then you can start to calmly go, okay, I understand what you're saying, but let's just think about the person we're talking to, and the research and the due diligence you've done, as you said, and then that helps you in the most professional way stand your ground, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay, so those are our 6 P's, and don't forget you can find all this information on our show notes via the website landanddeliver.co.uk. And really, we do say that whilst you go through these 6 P's, the first 3 are the ones that, you know, give you all that rich information, and it's good to staying there a little bit longer, that understanding the person, understanding their problem, and understanding the pressure they're in. Because I don't know about you, but for me, that's the real time when I start to then go, okay, inspiration, these are different routes we can go down, that now you're in the middle bit, you can now come up with the answers. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but I sometimes have about 3 or 4 ways. And that's great, because then you can start to sense test that in the room and the expertise, and you can start to talk about, that's where the kind of good stuff happens, yeah?
The beauty with this framework is it's really helping you to have that critical voice, that kind of nagging conscience on your shoulder, that yes, you want to get to the sweet spot and get that solution quickly, but the framework with these 6 Ps allows you to say, right, actually, we're going to step back, we're going to pause, we're going to have some critical thinking that allows us to just pause and think things through. And that saves you time in the long run. Because if you just go ahead and do it intuitively and impulsively, some of these things you may forget. And we're human, we're time poor, we sometimes forget. But by using these 6 Ps, you're doing something that feels comfortable, that fits with your brand voice, your marketing objectives and goals, but also allows you to measure that social proof and those outcomes, and then have a really watertight set of messages and branding and campaigning that helps you feel, okay, let's give this a go, let's go with it.
So there you go. So there we have it. We have our 6 Ps and our podcast that hopefully now you can confidently go into a creative meeting and confidently come out with ideas or sets of ideas that you can much more confidently say, this is going to work, and we're not going to have to go back and then fix it in the edit. So if this episode is connected with you, we've put together the show notes, obviously, and they include that full framework and the prompts for each stage, and also examples of how this works in real life marketing videos.
And if you've ever felt frustrated because your content was clear but ineffective, you're not alone. In fact, think of us as your gurus, the people that you can rely on. Keep in touch with us, connect with us, email. We read everything, and we would be delighted to hear from you. Like, subscribe, and stay in touch.
Yeah, and you can find those emails on our website, landanddeliver.co.uk. And to get those show notes and all those kind of things and the email address, all you got to do is just fill in a little form there, just a few details, and then you'll get the show notes, and also you'll get an alert as well, a heads up when the next episode goes live. But until next time, take care.